Hello and welcome to this week's Truth Be Told, a show about all things local government, and it has me as your host and the town manager, Melissa Arrighi. This show is another way we're trying to reach out to the public and find out what the residents want to hear about, what they'd like to know about, and let them verify what is happening at Town Hall and their other town offices and town departments. So if any of you watching today have a question or a topic you would like me to address on the show, let me know. Feel free to reach out anytime. All my information is here to get in touch with me. And if you hear something or just want to know something, we are here for you. So today on the show, I bring on our conservation agent, or also known as conservation planner, Rich Vacca. I'm delighted to have him because in teasing him a little bit before the show started, I see that unlike other guests, he has not appeared on the local government channel as much maybe as some of our other department and division heads. So welcome, Rich. I will try not to pick on you and put you on the spot at all.
Thanks, Melissa. Good morning.
First of all, since you are somewhat new, and certainly I've never been on a show with you before, I want you to tell the public a little bit about yourself and your background, how long you've been with Plymouth, and what your main role is here.
Sure. Let's see, I started here in Plymouth in 2013. So it's been 8 wonderful years working for the town. As you indicated, my title is conservation planner, and I act as a conservation agent. This is the 4th town that I've worked for since I left the private sector. I worked in Franklin, West Bridgewater, Hanson, and then here in Plymouth. Prior to that, I was in the private sector. I worked for several big engineering companies doing environmental licensing, permitting. I've been a wetlands biologist, an aquatic and marine toxicologist. I'm also an attorney. Although I don't practice law on behalf of the town, I do bring those resources to the job here as conservation agent. And my main function is to be the legal and technical advisor to the Conservation Commission. Yeah, that about sums it up.
Well, you know what? I love hearing that you worked in West Bridgewater. I didn't know that until right now. That is my hometown. That's where I grew up. So I have a really soft spot for West Bridgewater. Did you do like anything with do you remember where the park was? They had the little bridge that would go over to South Street. Did you on that project?
Yeah, I remember that vividly.
That was controversial.
Oh, yeah. Well, like you, I'm from Brockton originally. So it was, when I took that job, it was kind of like going home. I knew a lot of the people, and yeah, that was an interesting time.
It is. It's a great little town. I mean, I know that they don't have a lot of open space in terms of parks. I always think of the town park. I mean, my junior prom was there. They still do the junior prom where they parade us all around outside. Great little community. At least they did that back in '86.
Sweet.
So one of the things I'd like to ask people is, for the average resident that's probably never dealt with conservation before or dealt with your office before, what are some of the frequently asked questions that you get? What are some of the residents that you meet for the first time, and why are they looking for your expertise or professional help?
Well, I think probably the most frequently asked question I get is, can I cut trees on my property? And most people know that if the trees are close to a wetland or a pond, that there's probably some conservation issue that they need to address. And I get a lot of people coming into talking about their neighbors, seeing things around town that concern them, and they come into our office and they ask questions. You know, how far away do you have to be from the wetland? When does the law apply? You know, I'm thinking about doing this project. And most of the time what we do is we advise them to engage with a civil engineer or a wetlands consultant and move through the process depending upon what it is that they want to do.
It's going to be difficult, the cases that you get. We had a guest on the show earlier, the last show, and she was talking about how often she serves as a mediator between two neighbors. I mean, neighborhood disputes are always the worst because government has a very awkward role in those situations. And sometimes when you invite us in, I warn people, once you invite us in and we start looking around, we tend to see other problems as well on both properties. So you need to be really careful. And I'm sure with you smiling that you've dealt with that quite a bit.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking that when our new administrator came in, Michelle Sampson, during the interview, I told her that, this is like working in a law office, an engineering office, and a psychologist's office. Because exactly, we do have a tendency to mediate, getting the parties together, having that conversation, trying to solve the problems that they have in a in a good manner. So yeah, we see that a lot.
And Rich, I have to imagine in Plymouth, because we're such a huge area with so many water resources, so many ponds, that a lot of what you have to look at is they want to do some kind of addition. They have both the septic system and they have close proximity to the wetlands. So they're going to be digging up whole areas that are close to an environmentally sensitive area. Is that the majority of your cases? And how often does your conscom meet?
Yes, those are the majority of our cases. In the other towns that I've worked in, they were in the process of developing. So there were lots of subdivisions, lots of industrial and commercial development. Here in Plymouth, what we see a lot is what you just described, additions, septics, driveways, relatively simple projects, but still would have potentially an adverse effect on the resource area. So that's basically the majority of what it is that we do. The commission is made up of a 7-member board. They meet every week from 7 usually till 9 o'clock on Tuesday nights. I have to say that this is probably the busiest office that I've ever managed. In most of the other towns that I've worked in, the commission met either once a month or once every 2 weeks. We handled, 7 to 10 cases a night. Here in Plymouth, we meet every week. We handle between 4 and 5 cases every night. And we try to live by the axiom that good decisions don't get made after 9 o'clock. So we do try to keep the meetings from going much later than that.
Well, I'm sure as somebody that likes to get here early in the morning, you could appreciate that, because sometimes those long days when those meetings go till 10 or 11, no, I have to agree with you, not the best decision-making time.
Absolutely. No, people are tired, they're hungry, they work all day. Yeah, the experience has shown that, as I said, 9 o'clock is about the cutoff time.
Rich, are we requiring in Plymouth that a lot of people that are in close proximity to the water go up on, I want to call them stilts, and I know that's not appropriate for buildings, but pilings or whatever it would be called?
Well, it depends, Melissa, on where the house is located. And certainly within FEMA flood zones, whether that's on the freshwater side or on the coastal side, FEMA has regulations for how high a house has to be above the base flood elevation, which is like a 100-year floodplain. And so if you're in a coastal area, if you want to build a new house, or if you want to modify the one that you have, the lowest structural member, like the bottom of the deck, has to be at least a foot above base flood elevation. If it's an inland area, then the lowest habitable floor has to be a foot above that base flood elevation. So that's it's more of a federal requirement, but we have included that in our local regulations as well.
And another one of the things that I know that can be sensitive here in Plymouth is gravel removal, especially when the gravel removal is for an agricultural purpose, or at least that's what we believe it is for, and that's how it's presented. Now, does that just go before the planning board, or does that end up with the Conservation Commission also?
Oh, again, it's going to depend on where it's located. If it's in a completely upland area, then there's no conservation review. On the other hand, if that activity is being done within 100 feet of a wetland, then there would be a conservation permit required.
And I have to imagine in Plymouth, it's going to be hard not to get near some kind of wetland.
Absolutely, with 365 ponds and all of the coastal areas that we have, 3 rivers. Yeah, we do have an awful lot of conservation jurisdiction here.
And it's just the two of you as staff members, right?
Well, Michelle Sampson, our administrator, myself, and Patrick Farah, who's our adjunct agent. He works about maybe half-time with us.
Oh, that's helpful. And I
Oh,
know
it really is.
over the last few years, maybe a little bit longer than that now, I forget how long we've been in this, how quickly it's gone by the time we've been in this building, but our offices work, the town manager's office through Tiffany Park works really closely with your administrator now, because there are so many times where the work that somebody's applying to be done, whether it's in their yard or on their revetment or wherever it is, you have to pass over public environmentally sensitive property to get there. So talk to me a little bit about some of those cases that you've worked with, how it's dovetailed with this office.
Oh, sure. You're absolutely right. In order to gain access to some of the coastal properties, the contractors will have to either use a town-owned right-of-way, a landing, or cross over some portion of the beach that's under the control of the town, not necessarily conservation. So in order to do that, they need to seek a license from your office. And Tiffany and Michelle and myself work together quite often whenever there's one of these situations. So the Conservation Commission is aware of it. They include it in the permit that they issue. That's called an order of conditions. And it states in there that prior to any work being done, they show evidence that a license agreement has been granted from the Board of Selectmen. Tiffany and your group draft that, the commission reviews it, signs it, and then brings it back to the Board of Selectmen for signature. And then that person has the authorization to use town-owned land for their private work.
You know, and that's something that might not even occur to people. Like, what's the big deal? If I need to do work on my revetment wall and I'm passing over the town landing or the town property with the heavy equipment, you know, these contractors know what they're doing. Why do I have to go through that extra step? I don't even think we ever thought of that a decade or so ago, but everything has changed so drastically. There's a lot more litigation. We've all seen that in our lives and in our work lives than there used to be. If there's any damage, so for example, I think how this first got brought to all our attention is one of the contractors went over a public landing, damaged it as he was doing work on something. And then the other neighbors were furious and they didn't want to pay to fix it. They felt the contractor should, or the neighbor, it was public property. We didn't even know they were using it. So I think that's how it all came to light. And it's hard to track everywhere where people are doing work. And if they indeed have to park on the public's property, store equipment on it, pass and repass over it, what if there's a hydraulic leak with this heavy equipment? So there is.
Well, that is one good thing that we've started over our, I don't know, maybe like the last 5 years or so. Any equipment that we have working on the beaches or within conservation jurisdiction have to use biodegradable hydraulic fluid now. So that if there is a leak of fluid, it's more like salad dressing on the beach as opposed to you know, a hazardous material. So we are addressing that part. And you're absolutely right. You know, people passing over town land a lot of times don't even think about it. And it is very, very important. You know, it's like, you know, would you want someone using your property to gain access to the beach without your permission? It's the same thought process.
Now, I was looking at usually before these shows, I check out the individual guests' website, because there are certainly things that you are all updating your website so often. I have to say, your conservation website's in great shape. So I don't know if that's you or Michelle, but congratulations on that. I was really interested in the conservation trail maps. When did all those get put together and how often are they updated?
Well, I have to thank Marine and Environmental Affairs for that. They're the ones who have been managing the land for the Conservation Commission, and they're the ones that have put together these maps. Aren't they awesome?
Yeah, they are.
They really are. And I'm always amazed at how much open space we do have and how many trails we have. And it's really great that you put that level of effort uh, into that.
I know Malcolm on the planning board for a long time. He has been working on mapping hiking trails through all
Right?
the conservation lands. Are you familiar with this?
Oh yeah, Malcolm is our trail guy. He's very good at it. He's been at it for a long time.
I can't remember if he told me or somebody else did. At some point, you'll be able to hike from somewhere, maybe not quite the north end of town, but from somewhere from downtown, you'll be able to hike all the way to the Bourne line. Have you heard that?
I sure have, and that's a goal. One of the things that we've done here and in other towns too, was that we want to have a trailhead within a 10-minute walk from any of our subdivisions and neighborhoods, so that people can leave their house, get out into the woods, and make their way all the way down. And what do they call that? I think that might be part of the Mass Bay Trail, which is a big trail system that runs from north of Boston all the way down to the canal. And people have been working on that for, geez, a few decades now.
That's the more
connecting all
fun.
those parcels.
That's the more fun part of our job, not so much the feuding neighbors, but when we get to work on things like the conservation trails. I was brainstorming with somebody, I think it might even have been like Chris Pratt from the Committee of Precinct Chairs. And we were talking about when you want to increase tourism, that ecotourism gets brought up a lot. And if we could have places for people to camp and maybe a yurt. And I mean, I don't know, there was some pretty glamorous ideas in there, but I think I just said glamorous because I was thinking of the glamping, because if I'm going to do any kind of camping, that's what I would definitely be looking for.
Oh yeah, those yurts are really cool. And yeah, a couple of the state parks have them. I know Shawnee down on the Cape has one that you can rent. Sleeps like 6 people. It's pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, I would love to see more of that around town, particularly places to camp. And whether we just provide tent sites or a yurt or some other structure lean to.
What about we can get JB, we can ask the construction crews if they can make one of those little houses. Those are really cute.
Oh yeah, tiny house.
The tiny houses.
Tiny house in the woods or on the beach. Yeah, I think that would be really cool.
I'm going to hit you up for one more serious subject, which is stormwater drainage. I noticed that is featured on your website under conservation, and that kind of surprised me a little bit. I thought that would be more under public works. How much is your conservation with that, and can you tell me a little about it?
Sure. That actually stems from the state law. Basically, the Conservation Commission is responsible for managing stormwater from commercial and industrial sites, because the whole idea there is that we want to treat that stormwater in a way that makes it clean before it gets released into our wetlands. And basically, homeowners, single-family homes, they're exempt from those regulations. But for any commercial and industrial properties that may be within conservation jurisdiction, there are standards that they have to meet. One of the big ones is that 80% of the total suspended solids in that stormwater need to be removed before it gets discharged into our wetlands. So if you have a big parking lot, you need to sweep the lot. When you design those detention basins, there has to be a place for that sediment to accumulate, for it all to fall out of the water before it gets discharged. You have to have an operations and maintenance plan so that this thing is maintained over the years. And usually, Melissa, what we'll do is we'll include those requirements in the orders of conditions that we issue. And we make it something we call a perpetual condition, which means that even after we sign off on the project, you get something called a certificate of compliance. And even when you get that, the requirements of the operations and maintenance plan is included, which means that it survives that issuance. So the applicant still has to do that basically in perpetuity or until things change.
Do we have somebody that goes and checks up on it annually? And one of the things I'm thinking of right now is in Colony Place, we had all been sitting around a table, I think 2 years ago, talking about the salt levels. And during the snow and ice removal, the salt levels were too high, or at least as we were doing testing, we thought it may be coming from that location. So how often do we have somebody go back and check up on them?
Well, if they have an order of conditions, if that activity is within conservation jurisdiction, then they're supposed to do that annually. And they're supposed to submit a report to our office at a minimum, indicating that they have done that they swept the parking lot, that they maintained the catch basins, they sucked all the sand out at the end of the season, that if there's a sediment forebay in that detention basin, that got cleaned out. And I know a lot of people, when they look at some of these detention basins, they look just like wetlands. They kind of function like wetlands too, in that, the plants and the bacteria and all that in there help to clean the water. But they also have to be maintained because they were designed to hold a certain amount. So occasionally, usually after a few years, someone has to come in and clear all that vegetation out. That's not a violation of the Wetlands Act because, well, they're technically not wetlands. They're stormwater management devices. So, yeah, that has to be done periodically, and they need to report that to us.
Right. I can imagine someday with all the development we have in Plymouth, and of course, properties change owners, they change hands. I can imagine someday we're going to have to put a position in your department that's similar to what we provided to Lee Hartman, where it's really somebody that is constantly going back through, in your case, those order of conditions to see what needs to be annually submitted. Because I don't want to fool anybody watching the show right now. To some degree, it's a trust system. They're supposed to submit it annually. They should submit it annually, but we are not going back with every development that we've done and looking to see, checking off that box. So, well, that's interesting. That's something that, well, I imagine some of how we find out when people aren't doing what they're supposed to do for annual reporting is from complaints from others, which is how the salt issue came up. So, well, that's interesting, Rich. Good to know.
Yeah, and certainly we would love to have that kind of either work with the other planner or to have someone within our organization that could do that, because there are a lot of perpetual conditions that the commission has applied over the years that, you're right, it's a trust thing. We have a similar issue with wetlands replication. When you have to rebuild the wetland because you filled it to do something, you have to build twice as much wetland to replace it. And that needs to be monitored at least for 3 years after it's been permitted. Same thing with a lot of the restoration work that's done on the coastal banks. What we do is we have them come up with a planting plan, they do the planting plan, and then they should monitor it every year to figure out, what plants are making it, which ones aren't, if there needs to be some supplemental planting. And we get a report every October for those 3 years, with the goal of having 75% of the plants survive that 3-year period. So
if they fill one in, they have to build one double the size.
Double.
And they have to maintain it, did you say for 15 years or report on it for 15 years?
No, they have to report on it for 3 years. We give them a 3-year period to make sure that the replicated area is functioning.
Boy, I bet these developers try and keep the original wetland and not have to make one that's double the size. That has to be a little expensive.
Oh, it's very expensive, and I agree. that's the deterrence.
Right. Good
Yeah.
job on that one.
Well, we have a saying. It's we call it a calculus. It's avoid, minimize, and mitigate. So if you can avoid us, please do. Just stay out of the wetlands, stay away from the buffer zone, and you won't have to deal with conservation. On the other hand, if you have to, then you only want to disturb a minimal amount. And if you have to disturb that minimal amount, then you've got to mitigate that. You got to make it better. You have to make up for what you broke. And in this case, if it's a filling, then yeah, you've got to build new wetland that functions the same way as the one you disturbed, just twice the square footage.
I love it. It's a great sound bite. So I wish I good job, Rich. Well, thank you for coming on the show today. That's going to do it. See, I told you it goes by really quickly. It's
That
easy.
was so cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll have you back another time. I'd love to bring you on as we get somewhere down the road with the FY23 budget, because if we are going to try and improve some of the services that we provide, we know we need to add staff. So if there are sort of key areas like that one that came up on the show today, where you think it might be nice to have somebody that is just monitoring that compliance, that is really their full-time job, going out inspecting, monitoring, tracking those reports, it's definitely something we should talk about.
I agree completely, and thank you so much.
All right. You take care. And that's all the time we have today. Thanks for tuning in. The show is taped weekly on Wednesday mornings and can be seen on the Comcast Channel 15 or Verizon Channel 47 every day at 7:30 in the morning. And then there's some additional days and times listed. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.